Hello, everybody. I'm John Green, the interim president of the University of Akron, and also the director of the Ray C. Bliss Institute of Applied Politics. The Institute takes a bipartisan approach to research and teaching about the political process. In particular, we place a special emphasis on understanding political parties and campaigns, grassroots activity, and ethical behavior. That's why we bring this program to you today. This November, Ohio voters will elect a new governor and decide between candidates for a U.S. Senate seat. To better inform you and other voters, we invited candidates from the two major political parties to sit down for a one-on-one interview with Tom Beres. Tom is a highly respected senior political correspondent, recently retired from WKYC-TV in Cleveland. He's also a member of the Cleveland Press Club Hall of Fame. Instead of sound bites or debates, you'll hear each candidate engage in an in-depth discussion of the issues that are of real importance to Ohio voters. Thank you for your interest, and on behalf of the University of Akron and the Ray C. Bliss Institute of Applied Politics, please enjoy the discussion.
As you heard, the University of Akron's Bliss Institute of Politics wants you to get a more complete picture of the candidates in this year's biggest Ohio elections, the races for senator and governor. I'm Tom Beres, formerly longtime political reporter for Channel 3 WKYC in Cleveland, and today I'm here with Democrat Rich Cordray, most recently head of the Watchdog Federal Consumer Protection Bureau. Rich, thanks for coming by.
My pleasure.
We are here with a studio audience. And we're going to try to cover a lot of ground, a lot of topics. So, again, grateful for your commitment of time here. Let's start with something that's been in the news today. And I wonder if there are people in the Cordray campaign running around smiling and high-fiving today. A poll today, and heaven knows there's no shortage of polls, but a new poll shows you up 6%. Yesterday there was a poll, had Mr. DeWine up 3%, but by and large they've been kind of neck and neck, back and forth. What does your gut level tell you about the status of the race?
Well, from one day to the next, my dad always taught me try not to get too high or get too low. And so we try to be very steady. The race is very close, and I think Ohioans are trying to make up their minds. They want to know who's interested in the concerns that are uppermost in their lives and who's got good practical plans to solve problems that will improve their lives. That's what I think this race boils down to.
Do you think it's going to break one way or another pretty soon?
I don't know.
Okay.
If I knew that.
You'd have a crystal ball, and they'd be
Yes.
paying you a lot of money to be a prognosticator. Mm-hmm. All right, so you don't have to be a super pessimist to stack Ohio's problems up and come up with a pretty bleak picture. Again, we're in a race to the bottom with West Virginia and the opioid crisis for most casualties and damage. Educational system. 5 of the 7 big city schools in Ohio all got Fs on their state report card. Ohio has been behind the national monthly average in job creation for 5.5 years until this summer. And we are a stagnant 45th in population growth and likely to be losing a member of Congress after the next census. And we could go on and on, all those unfilled jobs because of not fully trained workers. So why in heaven's name would you want to inherit all of these problems and be the guy in charge for trying to solve them when the people who have been sitting in office holders' chairs haven't got it done? And why should people think you could do it better than your more experienced opponent?
Well, first of all, the people who are running on the other side are the people who've been in charge for the last 8 years. And so if people aren't satisfied with what they see and they want change, Betty Sutton and I represent that change. And so I think many Ohioans do feel that way, and I think that's a factor in what we'll see happen this year. In terms of why would I want this job and what do I think I can do, I think there's a lot of potential in Ohio. Look, people who live in this state love this state. We love the quality of life. We love what it means to be part of these communities that enrich in our lives, and it's a great place to raise a family. We have that, but we also need to make sure opportunity is being spread more fairly across the state. We need to enhance and improve education and training, skills training in this state so that our workforce competes with the rest of the world. And we need to protect our health care, and that's really important. Keep costs down, ensure more reliable coverage, and that's become a key issue in this race. It's a peace of mind issue.
All right,
for
we'll
so
try to
many
drill down a
families.
little bit more on those as we go along here. But as you know, Ohio has picked Republicans in 6 of the last 7 governor's races. Do you think the state has just shifted that far right, or has it had something to do with the caliber of candidates that the Democrats have put out there?
I think that the state remains a swing state. People here are open-minded. They are open to being persuaded. They want to hear what case you can make, and they want to know what you're going to do that's going to affect their lives, what's going to improve their lives. It's not about the politicians themselves or what they say. It's about what you can do to make people's lives better. And that's what I'm all about. It's what I've been about throughout my time in politics, taking on tough fights, standing up for the working and middle class in this state. And I think that's what has defined my service, and I think that that's what people want. They want somebody who will fight for them, stand up for them, make sure they're treated fairly with dignity and respect.
Okay, so let's imagine that you wind up winning and become the next governor. In all probability, you would be dealing with a Republican-controlled legislature. First of all, give me your thoughts about the priorities and performance of the legislature till now. I mean, a lot of people say it'd be nice if they spent more time on education and job creation and health care and less time on ideological things. I mean, give them a report card.
I think I would agree very much with what you just said, Tom. I think this legislature has not been focused on the kitchen table issues that most people in the state are really focused on. On health care, they didn't want to have Medicaid expansion in the state, which has been very good for the state, and I give Governor Kasich credit for bringing it here, and I will fight to keep it. They haven't focused as much as they should on education and closing the skills gap, and the fact that we've slipped down to be the 45th state in the nation for college affordability. And in terms of spreading opportunity across the state, they've had an obsession with more tax cuts for the richest Ohioans that don't trickle down and that have not aided our economy and have led instead to sales tax and property tax rises at the local level, which hurt a lot of people. And I think it's time that we rethought some of those policies, and I think it's a good time for a change in Ohio.
So the difficulty, the challenge in working with this opposite party controlled legislature, why are they going to be impressed and want to do all the ambitious things that you put in front of them?
Well, I don't know that they will, but I do think on a number of issues I've seen over the course of this campaign, I think we can find a bipartisan basis for reform. I would say education reform, what's happening in the K through 12. People have seen on both sides of the aisle we have too much unfunded mandates, too much heavy, high-stakes standardized testing. There are a lot of things that we can review and rethink and put teachers more in charge of the classroom. Teachers are trained to teach children. There's a lot of magic that happens in that classroom. We need to take the shackles off and let them do what they do best. But I also think that on infrastructure, which is something I've put forward a very specific plan for how we proceed on infrastructure, I think the legislature will be amenable to that. I think on early childhood intervention, there's really no difference between the two candidates in this race on the need to do more there. And on workforce development, I think we can have consensus on that. There will be things we will fight about, and there will be things where I will draw hard lines and say, don't bring certain bills to me and I will veto them. Let's not waste our time on that. Let's focus on more productive things. But I also think a governor can work with cities and counties around the state. A governor can take something to the ballot if the legislature is not being responsive. There's other mechanisms as well.
What's the best case scenario that you could hope for if you won for a relationship with President Trump? He didn't seem to hold the agency that you worked for in very high esteem, and I'm guessing, you probably don't spend a lot of time texting each other and sharing thoughts. I mean, so realistically, would that be a detriment to Ohio if they had a governor who was in disfavor with the White House?
Well, I have a Twitter feed, and I try to think before I tweet, so that may be a novelty, but that's what I do. I would say in terms of relationship with the federal government, not just the president, but the Congress, it's really important for the governor of Ohio to recognize that the governor's job is to stand up for Ohio. If the president or the Congress are doing things that are going to be helpful to Ohio, I will work with them. But if they're doing things that hurt Ohio, like trying to dismantle health care and take it away from Ohioans, I will fight them, every step of the way. And that's what I will do. I think Mike DeWine has not shown the ability to do that. He's not willing to stand up to President Trump, maybe for political reasons, it may be because they agree on many things. But we need to have somebody who will stand up for Ohio, not cheerlead for the White House.
The president has been quite outspoken in bragging about what he feels is an extraordinary, strong economy that's been created on his watch. I'm not sure what the stock market is doing today.
It's not going well for it today.
All right. But Do you think Ohio is better or worse off economically since the president took office?
Well, look, I would say this. The economy has been recovering for 9.5 years. The economy was broken during the last 6 months of George W. Bush's term in office. That's when the financial crisis hit. That's when unemployment started to tank. And we had that very deep and sharp recession, worst economic event of our lifetimes. Ever since, under 8 years under President Obama and 1.5 years now under President Trump, the economy's been steadily recovering. That recovery has been very uneven in places across the country and in places like Ohio. You go into lots of communities, lots of our small and medium-sized towns, and people continue to feel left out, left behind, feel nobody's hearing their voices, their wages seem flat and are not rising, and the costs seem to keep going up. So a lot of people feel strapped. And just because certain averages are good, the unemployment average is low, that's true. The stock market average has been high. Who knows what that will be over time. But a lot of people don't live their lives in the average, they live in the concrete. And in our communities, a lot of them feel that there's more that can be done to create a fairer economy in Ohio, and I think they're right about that.
Do you believe the tax cuts have delivered what the president claims they have delivered? More money in the paycheck of most working people, and a rising tide lifting all boats kind of mentality here? Or do you believe that most of the money has gone to the very rich at the top of the economic spectrum, and the corporations who are glad to be having all that extra money to buy back their own stock?
Well, it's not what I believe. I think the facts have shown that this tax bill was mostly focused on the wealthiest Americans and on the corporations, certainly. And the permanent cuts went to the corporations, whereas temporary cuts went to individuals. There's always a sugar high when you cut taxes because there's more money flowing into the economy temporarily. There's also consequences, all right? In Ohio, as we've cut income taxes at the state level, we've had to raise sales and property tax at the local level. That hurts a lot of Ohioans, especially our seniors. At the federal level, the tax cut has meant that they've blown up the deficit. The deficit is exploding at the federal level. That's meant a couple things. It meant interest rates are starting to rise, and that's starting to affect the economy and the stock market. And also, we haven't had money to do things that we need, like infrastructure. The president promised infrastructure because they spent all the money on the tax bill, $1.5 trillion, and they've blown up the deficit. We haven't had anything for infrastructure. We need that help. We need that in Ohio. We need it across the country. So, there are consequences to everything you do. And I would say on this one, it's not clear to me that that was a good direction for the country, and we'll see what happens over time.
How big a factor do you think President Trump is in this race? Is this partially a referendum on President Trump, do you think? That's
up to voters to decide, not me personally. I do think midterm elections are often a time when people want to balance against the concentration of power that they see in Washington. They want to balance against the White House. They want to balance against the Congress. Mm-hmm. Right now, Congress and the White House are controlled by Republicans, and I think there's a natural desire for people to balance by supporting Democrats. The same is true in this state, where the legislature and the governor are both Republican, and people want to see some checks and balances on Capitol Square. We've had a lot of corruption on Capitol Square. We've had a lot of dysfunction on Capitol Square. Too much one-party government leads to that kind of complacency and allows greed to have its way. And I think having checks and balances on the state government would be a good thing. And I think most people are looking for a change this year, and we're the change.
The people of Ohio for the last few months have been watching your opponent and his supporters paint a very scary or unflattering picture of you. I mean, I think if you were an ordinary voter sitting there watching these ads, you wouldn't vote for you either. I mean, okay, so I'll give you a chance to rebut them here. All right, so first of all, the most recent one has a parade of women. You don't care, you don't care, you don't care. Let's talk about the issues that gave rise to that. The rape kits. Mr. DeWine is taking solitary credit for finally doing something that should have been done a long time ago, making sure that all rape kits get tested. And because you weren't able to do it on your watch, you let serial rapists run amok and turn your back on the women of Ohio. What is your retort to that?
Look, I don't recognize myself in these ads, and Mike DeWine knows that the case he's making is wrong and false in key respects. In terms of rape kits, the issue arose 5 months before I left the Attorney General's office. Okay, what did I do? Immediately, we put in place the testing protocol that his office still uses to this day. We created the statewide commission to oversee testing of rape kits, which his office then continued, and we put robotics in the lab so that that could be done much more speedily than it had been done in the past. That helped solve the problem.
So you're saying there wasn't enough time for you to do more than you did?
No, I actually did a lot in a very short amount of time. It then took him 7 years to test the rape kits. So the notion that somehow I'm to be criticized for what I did or didn't do in 5 months is a totally bogus charge.
But this was fundamentally a police department problem, correct?
There were no untested rape kits in my office. It was a police department and sheriff department problem, and we worked on starting to clean it up, and then he continued that. So anyway, that's really kind of a non-issue in this race. It's sort of a past matter that's no longer really current. More to the point is, on law and order issues, Mike DeWine has been a big failure for the state of Ohio, because what has been the #1 crime issue of the last 8 years? It's been the opioid crisis in Ohio, and it's been the drug dealers having their way in Ohio as opioid-related deaths, overdoses, rose from 3,000 3 years ago to 4,000 2 years ago to 4,900 last year. And fentanyl in particular, the drug dealers have made Ohio their playground. We had 70 fentanyl deaths a year when I was Attorney General. Now last year there were 3,431. Just take that in, from 70 to 3,400. He has massively failed on this problem. He was asleep at the switch. This is the deadliest drug we've ever had in Ohio, and the drug cartels have flooded us with it. When I am governor, we will crack down on fentanyl. We'll put people who deal fentanyl behind bars, and we will drive it out of Ohio. And that will save a lot of lives, and Mike DeWine should have done that. There's a reason why the law enforcement groups in this state, the Fraternal Order Police and the Patrolmen's Association, have endorsed me, not Mike DeWine, in this race. It's because they know I'll be tougher and more effective on crime. But he's tried to turn that into an issue because he knows that his record is weak on this, and he's trying to deflect attention away from that.
The ads that brought out the unfavorable findings of the work environment at the federal agency you oversaw, that claimed that a number of women, a number of minority employees felt intimidated, discriminated against, that it was a toxic workplace environment. From your perspective, what more could you have done, should you have done, or was that not an issue that you feel primarily responsible for?
No, it's that the claims are mostly untrue, okay? There was never an EEO finding against the Consumer Bureau when I was there. There were grievances filed because of a performance system that came up before I became director. And when I became director, we threw it out and revised it and fixed it. And I had a great record on diversity hiring of both women and minorities at the Bureau, 38% minorities and 50% women in leadership as well. So we did a great job at the Bureau on these issues. These are industry lobbyist talking points that were put forward to try to push us back from being aggressive for consumers. What did I do at the Consumer Bureau? I got $12 billion back for 30 million Americans. Money in their pockets that had been taken from them by big financial companies that nobody had been willing to take on before and fight to get people treated fairly. That's what I did at the Bureau, and I'm very proud of that work.
Okay, so, you know, the guy in charge, the buck stops here. I mean, you don't feel responsible for any negative work environment issues at the agency?
No, there were some negative work environment issues that I inherited when I became the director, and we worked to fix them and improve them. So again, it's industry lobbyist talking points that Mike DeWine is recycling here, and it's basically untrue. So that's the bottom line.
All right.
Let's talk about the other issues, though, that he's trying to avoid. Healthcare in particular. Okay.
We're coming to it. We're coming to it, I promise.
Because those are the things that really matter to Ohio.
All right, issue one. Obviously, a lot of discussion about this. He's tried to personalize it as if this is your own Richard Cordray presents.
Which he knows is not so, yeah.
but obviously you have a lot of law enforcement, sheriffs and prosecutors and judges that by and large seem to be lining up against it, and respond to their arguments that this would ultimately let a lot of undesirable or dangerous criminals out on the street early and open the floodgates for drug dealers to stampede into Ohio because of some of the more lenient definitions.
So again, we just talked about this a moment ago. He claims that this will cause drug dealers to stampede in Ohio with fentanyl. Newsflash, he seems to have missed the fact that over the last 3 years, drug dealers have stampeded into Ohio with fentanyl on his watch. Fentanyl deaths went from 70 a year to 3,400 a year on his watch. Law enforcement reports that drug cartels flooded Ohio with fentanyl on his watch, all right? And law enforcement groups who know this best, who work on this in the front lines every day, are supporting Rich Cordray, not Mike DeWine, for governor, because they know I'll be more effective. In terms of issue one, people can agree or disagree on that. It's a ballot issue that 700,000 Ohioans put on the ballot this fall. We'll have a vote in 4 weeks on that. It will either succeed or it will fail. Either way, we'll be back to work the next day to try to stem the opioid crisis and the fentanyl flow of drugs into this state. And I will work to crack down and put drug dealers behind bars, drive fentanyl out of Ohio, and do the thing that issue one is kind of about, which is let's move more money into community treatment for people with a drug dependency problem.
How are we really
and not imprison them in our prisons as felons, which is the worst place we can put them, the most expensive place, the least humane place, and least productive place.
How are we really certain that this would do what it sets out to do, since there doesn't seem to be a wealth of experience, as California did something similar?
Utah, and Oklahoma have all implemented something similar, and it has, in fact, moved money into treatment and helped with their drug problems there. But the one thing we do know, Tom, is that we've been doing something on Mike DeWine's watch that hasn't been working. Opioid deaths are at record levels. As you said in your intro, we're the second worst state in the country. Only West Virginia is worse than we are. That wasn't true when Mike DeWine took office. We've slid way down on his watch. And fentanyl has taken over this state on his watch. The one thing I don't want to do is continue the failed status quo of Mike DeWine, whether it's issue one or some sort of legislative package, which, by the way, the legislature has never been willing to put forward. And Mike DeWine could have done this if he had leadership on this issue, but he hasn't shown any. Whatever it is, we need change. We need to have a different path forward. We can't keep banging our head against the wall. It's the definition of insanity to keep repeating things that aren't working. That's what Mike DeWine wants to do.
So to those people who said, well, regardless of how you feel about what this would accomplish, this doesn't belong in the Constitution.
Look, I'd be perfectly happy to have the legislature pass a package. They haven't done it. They've had 10 years, 20 years to do it. They haven't done it. That's why 700,000 people are frustrated in going to the ballot on this, okay? If the legislature would do it, that would be great. But if they're not going to do it, do we have to simply sit idly by and watch them in action and see the state continue to flounder? So anyway, let's talk about things that Ohioans are telling me matter to them, like health care. Okay, on health care, Mike DeWine on day one in office, and this is perhaps why he took his eye off the ball on fentanyl and opioids, he was obsessed with taking away health care from Ohioans. He filed a lawsuit to set aside the Affordable Care Act and its protection for people who have a pre-existing condition. And half of Ohio has a pre-existing condition. And what's at stake here is, can an insurance company accept your premiums when you're healthy, and then when you get sick or have a condition you're diagnosed with, cut you off of health insurance or raise your premium sky high because you're now high risk? That's not the way insurance system is supposed to work. But Mike DeWine was in favor of overturning that. Why? Because he's gotten $2.5 million from the drug companies, insurance companies over the years, and he sides with them. It will pad their bottom line if they can throw people off coverage once they get sick. But it's bad for Ohioans, it's bad for health care, it's bad for our communities. But that's where he has been. Now he's trying to change his tune now that we're in a race, and he sees that this political position he took has been hurting him. I'm in favor of protecting people with pre-existing conditions, have been all along. I'm in favor of the Medicaid expansion John Kasich brought to the state, have been all along. Mike DeWine is now scrambling around to find some sort of foothold because his position against Obamacare is turning out to people realize it would hurt a lot of Ohioans, and they don't want it.
So what is your overall position on Obamacare? Obviously, it's not perfect. Some people say, okay, the provisions that you've just outlined, and the keeping young people on their parents' insurance, that there are a number of issues that I think there's close to unanimity on. Is it possible to kind of a la carte, let's keep these and fix those that are broken?
Not so easy to do, as we saw when the Senate tried to do repeal and replace. They had the repeal down, they could do that, but then to just take all that away from people and not have something to replace it, and it's hard to put all those interlocking pieces together. The only law that's ever managed to do it is the Affordable Care Act. So for Mike DeWine to say, we're going to knock that down, but then it's like we can repeal the weather, but we can't just then bring the sunshine and have sunshine every day. That just doesn't work. That isn't the way it works. But let me talk about, we'll call it Cordray Care in Ohio. My plan is about reducing costs and providing more reliable coverage to more Ohioans. How do we go about reducing costs? We will use the state's leverage to negotiate harder with the drug companies to bring down prescription drug prices. That's a big cost for a lot of people, including our seniors. We have these middlemen in our healthcare system, pharmacy benefit managers. They have been shown now to have taken hundreds of millions of dollars out of the system. They need to be managed and reined in, and we need to cut them off from taking that money out of the healthcare system, put it back in our pockets, or improve healthcare with it. The Medicaid expansion of John Kasich, again, he's a Republican, I'm a Democrat, but I commend him for that. It was good for Ohio, it remains good for Ohio. We should continue that. And what it does is it brings down all of our health care costs by getting more people into the system, more people access to coverage. They actually go to the doctor, they get preventive care, their health outcomes are better, and they don't end up coming into our emergency rooms for uncompensated, very serious, very costly care later in life. That's a good thing for Ohio, no question about it. Those are the things that I stand for.
Since you have a plan with a lot of moving parts presently, and it's difficult to separate. Yes.
Yes. It's just
your thoughts about a topic's getting a lot of buzz and discussion in political circles. Way out there, Bernie Sanders single payer system.
Well, if you can show me how you pay for it, then I would be willing to consider it. But right now, the price tag is out of sight.
Unrealistic.
Hard to do at a state level, period. So that's not something that I think is in the cards for Ohio.
All right. Let's talk about education. Both you and Mr. DeWine have rolled out very ambitious early childhood development and education plans. And so differentiate between the two, and why do you believe yours would be better and more effective?
Actually, I don't. I think that here we pretty much agree on this. We both agree that children aged 0 through 5, those are really critical years. The research shows it. If you want to talk about K through 12, that's great, but when you get to K, you already have about 40% of the students falling significantly behind. And so it's too late to create the kind of opportunity that they need. So we need more home visits, we're agreed on that. We need to strengthen the foster care system, we're agreed on that. I think we need to have universal pre-K. He's sort of uncertain on that, but I think we're probably largely in agreement. And I think that we should have more child care support for working parents and single parents. And I'm not sure that he's quite where I am on that.
Do you have a guesstimated?
We're very similar on.
Do you have a guesstimated price tag for all of this?
We both think it's a significant price tag, but it's one that we're willing to pay. And I think that in my case, and probably in his case, this is something we would do with some of the surplus that the state government is running right now, and it's quite doable. What's
your broad position on charter schools? Should they continue to get state funding? And I guess larger, hotter topic, the ECOT situation. What steps would you take to prevent another repeat of the ECOT scandal?
Yeah, and what did Mike DeWine fail to do as Attorney General the last 8 years? So, first of all, on charter schools, this has been an experiment in Ohio for about 20 years. And if you're running an experiment with something as precious as taxpayer dollars and children's futures, and both are at stake here, you need to monitor that experiment very carefully. And where it's not working, you need to root it out and fix it. There was such a mania or a desire to have charter schools in Ohio that they were never willing to monitor this experiment carefully. And by the way, the for-profit charter operators were contributing a lot of money to Republican politicians, including Mike DeWine and his running mate, both of whom got tens of thousands of dollars, essentially to look the other way at the failures of charter schools. So what I would say about charter schools is good functioning charter schools that are actually improving education, I'm in favor of those. But those that are not functioning well need to be relentlessly and remorselessly rooted out and flunked and put out of business.
So when you say look the other way, you think it was like a tacit understanding where Mr. DeWine said, keep the money coming and I won't pay no attention?
So we need to flunk the failing charter schools, and ECOT was the prime example. So let's talk about the looking the other way, okay? ECOT was a online charter school, largest in the nation. They ended up, it turns out, had a 39% graduation rate. Nobody ever really looked into that, okay? They were making large contributions to Republican politicians, as I said, in the tens of thousands of dollars for both DeWine and Husted.
So this is
and they did not want to stop the gravy train. So ECOT was allowed to continue to fester even though it was performing poorly. Then the worst of it is that wasn't good enough for ECOT. They wanted even more. So they inflated their attendance figures. They were an online charter school. It wasn't that hard for them to pad people on the rolls who didn't even exist. And it ended up, we now know, they stole $186 million by falsifying attendance figures. And again, nobody minded the store. Nobody protected taxpayers.
He is suing
Nobody
them.
saved the money.
He is going after them.
Now that he's running for governor, it's too late. He's not going to get any money back while he's Attorney General. And maybe down the road, I don't know if we'll get it back or not. It's all gone out the door.
Do you think most ordinary Ohioans are aware that this has had a financial impact on their hometown school district?
I think that there's been a lot of effort to make people aware, and you can actually quantify the numbers. When we were in Cleveland the other night, it was something like $39 million that was taken from the Cleveland schools over the course of this scandal. And again, to have people in government, whether you're Democrat, Independent, or Republican, doesn't really matter. To have people in government who aren't protecting taxpayer money, who are letting people steal $186 million, and had reason that they were perhaps looking the other way because they were joining in the proceeds, some of which were being funneled back to them. You know, that's just bad government. We need better government. We need to root out the corruption. We need balance on Capitol Square. We need a Democratic governor checking this Republican legislature, and I think that would be good for Ohio.
So 5 of the 7 biggest big city school systems in Ohio have one thing in common. They all got Fs on their state report cards overall. And again, maybe that's a little bit simplistic because a lot of them are making progress on many fronts.
Maybe a little simplistic. I think it may be a little simplistic, yes.
Yes. But should the state take over failing school systems like this? I know there are a couple of systems that are currently under state control. There's one up in Cleveland now, East Cleveland, which I think is on the verge of a possible takeover. But I mean, would things be better if the state jumped in on systems that are just dysfunctional and seem irreparably broke?
So my running mate, Betty Sutton, and I are deeply opposed to the state takeover of school districts and shoving aside the local community and the people who have the most personal stake in it. By the way, I just say, since I'm mentioning her, my running mate, Betty Sutton, is a graduate of the University of Akron Law School, so she's a proud alum here, and she is terrific. Now, back
Betty's a zip, okay.
There you go. She's a zip with real zip. So, in any event, in terms of the failing school districts, you know, if districts are under challenge, we should work with them. We should provide support, we should provide resources, we should provide focus, strategic thinking. The state should work with the local community, but not shove them aside. And it's not respectful. And by the way, where do we get the confidence that people in Columbus are going to run the school district better? They're the same ones who were in charge of this ECOT scandal and performed so dismally on that. I don't have confidence that having them come in is necessarily going to be better. But when we have had communities in fiscal distress over the years, where they overspent or they got upside down on their budget, when I was treasurer, we would work with them. We would have people who would work with them and work with the finances and so forth, but not take it away from them. work with them to get them back on their feet so that they could then paddle on down the river.
Would you be more of a hands-on governor when it comes to education? I mean, right now, okay, it's delegated, and there's a state superintendent and educational authorities, and we rely on them. Would you get more deeply involved?
I think virtually every governor feels that way, because governors are often held responsible for what happens for education in the state, and therefore want to be able to, take the steps to be able to improve it. So I do feel that way. But you need to, in Ohio, you operate through a lot of other people, and you need to show leadership and bring people together. We have 600 and some school districts. Each has their own superintendent, each has their own school board. Some of the leadership you need to exert from Columbus is to work with people, not to just sort of take everything over. And I certainly, again, oppose the policy of the state taking over school districts and running them from Columbus. I don't think that's a good answer.
Let's talk about college circumstances at the moment. Ohio college students are in a difficult situation. We know that they're graduating with, many of them graduating with a big cross to bear for a long time. Mr. DeWine has promised tuition freezes, so you'll be paying the same when you graduated as you were when you came in as a freshman. What are your proposals to try and keep a lid on college costs?
Well, he said that, but he's really passing the buck on it. He's saying he'll put people on the boards of trustees and they'll sort of figure it out. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. It's not been so easy over the years. But let's look at that problem. College affordability is a problem across the nation, all right? Tuition costs have gone out of sight. They've risen faster than even healthcare inflation has over the years. But Ohio has done worse than most states. We're all the way down to being 45th in the country now out of the 50 states for college affordability. So we need to do better here. We're cutting off our own future if we have fewer people getting further skills training and education beyond K through 12 than is true in the rest of the country. Okay, so what can we do there? First of all, I think we need to recognize that skills training should be a whole flexible spectrum, and some of it involves going to college and some of it doesn't. And we need pathways to the middle class in Ohio that don't necessarily involve getting a college degree. That could be apprenticeship programs, could be certification programs, could be skills training, and our community colleges are doing a great job here. A 2-year associate degree may be plenty for a lot of people to be able to compete in the workforce. But at the same time, college degrees are valuable for people. Not everyone has the same value, but they add a lot of value for people. How do we get more students into college and be able to graduate from college and bear the financial strain? There's a number of things we can do. We need to continue to push more toward allowing high school students to earn college credits before they graduate from high school, which will then reduce the overall cost of higher education. We have increasing number of 2+2 programs, so people could start at a community college, do 2 years there, then transfer to a college and university and get a 4-year degree, or decide that a 2-year degree is plenty and they're going to be ready for the workforce. And we need to look at ways to reduce the cost for students. A lot of this is there are a lot of families that fail to optimize federal loans and grants. For a family, this is a new experience. They haven't really dealt with it before, haven't thought much about it. You'd hope you get good help from guidance counselors at the high school, and sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. The state could be much more strategic about helping families optimize their situation. This is part of the community college program that we are promoting based on what they're doing in Tennessee and New Jersey, that if you optimize federal student loans and grants, then it is actually fairly cheap to get through the rest of community college without adding further debt. And the whole price tag.
Are you talking about free community college, or?
That's the phrase that's used around the country. I don't particularly like that phrase because it really isn't free. That's a bit of a misnomer because you are employing federal loans and grants, and the loans you'll have to repay, but essentially not having to take on additional debt. That can be done, and we can do that for college and university as well. And the other thing is we need universal FAFSA completion in Ohio, which we don't have, and a lot of families get cut off from higher education because they don't complete the FAFSA or don't really understand the process very well.
How do you get better communication between the private sector and educators and schools so that students come out with actual marketable skills and employers are able to fill these thousands of positions that are going begging because there's nobody capable to fill them? And is there a role for the state to be a catalyst and all that?
I believe so. And yes, you got the problem right. We have the so-called skills gap. We have people who want to work, but they don't have the skills to fill jobs that are available. And we have businesses that want to hire, but they're not finding people who have the skills that they can hire. That's frustrating on both sides. And it does have quite a bit to do with the programs that are preparing students for the workforce and young people for the workforce. So how do you get better communication? You make a very conscious, deliberate, strategic effort to attain that communication. And especially our community colleges are working better and better with the businesses in their community to understand the real-time needs, and understanding that works reasonably well with large employers who can really project their needs into the future. But with smaller employers, we need to do it segment by segment of the economy, and I think it's a lot of hard work to do this. We have a skills gap problem around the country. It's not like anybody's doing great on this, and if it were easy to solve, everybody would have solved it. But there's no reason why we can't do better than the other states in Ohio. And again, I do think that communication, you've got the nub of it. It's communication between businesses and the people who are producing the pipeline of talent. And if we have a good, steady pipeline of talent, businesses not only will thrive who are here, but more businesses will want to come here. That's what they're looking for.
What is your program or agenda as far as offering incentives for businesses to stay, expand, or move to Ohio? Are you a big believer in government incentives?
I'm not a big believer in those. I think you have to compete with other states, but I hate to see money thrown at companies on these incentive programs that are often disproportionate at the expense of our homegrown small and medium-sized businesses, whose expansion is really the key to growth in Ohio. So I've told the folks at Jobs Ohio that one of the things I think we need to do, and we will do when I'm governor, is focus more on the existing homegrown small and medium-sized businesses who aren't looking to threaten to move to New Jersey or Tennessee and get some tax break out of it, but they can use some strategic support, some low-cost financing when they're looking to expand. That would be a good thing. That would be a wise
So you would keep the Jobs
money.
Ohio structure in place?
Yeah, it's been legislated. It's not going to be repealed, and I think I can work with that group. I've sat down and talked with them. I think we can do more workforce development. I think we can do more small business assistance, and I think that would make it work very well.
Are there particular industries that you would focus on that you believe have potential to be major job creators that perhaps have not gotten the support that they should in Ohio?
Yeah, I actually think that the Jobs Ohio strategy has it about right. They've focused on a specific set of industries where much of the job creation is happening. And by the way, one of them is healthcare. It's not only a healthcare issue, but it's an economic issue in Ohio. As our population ages, healthcare is growing, but also advanced manufacturing and IT of all kinds. And by the way, one of the things we're missing out on, completely swinging and missing on, is clean energy and renewable energy, where states around the country and countries around the world are rushing to get those jobs of the future, and jobs that produce energy that is on a lasting trajectory that helps us sustain the planet and maintains dependable, lower priced energy over the long run. And a lot of companies are looking for that when they decide to locate. You know, again, it's not just the tax package you throw at them. They'll happily pocket that, but they want dependable, low cost energy, and they want a pipeline of talent. That's going to attract people much more.
So many of the particular bills or do's and don'ts that the legislature has passed regarding alternative energy did not create a very welcoming environment, I think, for prospective alternative energy producers. How do you change that climate?
Yeah, I'll put it more bluntly. I think the legislature has walked us backward away from a future in clean energy and clean energy jobs. And I think that was a very poor decision, not well thought out, and I think we need to reverse it and move back into being aggressive about renewable energy again, and energy conservation.
Another Cleveland-focused question here. Are you familiar with an effort underway now in Cleveland by many young aspirational leaders to try and make Cleveland a leader in something called blockchain technology, which is a big part of cryptocurrency now, and I guess has the potential, many people think, to create lots and lots of jobs in many different industries. There seems to be a real push to try and position Cleveland to be a leader in that field. A, are you familiar with that? And B, do you have any sense of how valuable or worthwhile you think that could be?
Yeah, I'm familiar with blockchain technology because it originated in the financial services sector. And when I was at the Consumer Bureau, we were looking at and working on those issues. And essentially, the blockchain technology is something that has grown into being something that goes beyond financial services into other areas because it can uniquely capture and preserve individualized information. So it could become relevant to healthcare and lots of other fields, as well as cybersecurity. And it is something that people haven't totally figured out what all the applications will be, but it's very promising technology, and it's now moved well beyond the financial services sector into other areas. If we could get out front of that, that would be a good thing. I think there will be lots of jobs available in that.
So you'd be willing to look at the possibility of the state playing a contributing role in that?
I would be. I'd be glad to talk to local leaders who are working on that, and also the companies that are working in that area. It's established enough to clearly be an opportunity of the future.
What will Betty Sutton's role be in a Cordray administration? What position is she going to play?
I think the campaign has shown that. She's a full partner to me. If you look at where we go and what we do around the state, she bears her full share of the load and then some. She has a strong record when she was a congresswoman. She's the one that did the cash for clunkers that helped save the auto industry. And she worked hard on the Health Care Act, including protection for people with pre-existing conditions. She got that to be in effect immediately and not delayed over time, which was important for a lot of families. In my administration, she'll be a full partner in Columbus come January 2019. We haven't talked about what other roles, aside from Lieutenant Governor, she will play, whether it be a general role where she's involved in decision-making with me on all fronts, or whether there might be a particular area some of the Lieutenant Governors and
yet to be
have
determined.
Focused on a cabinet department or something like that, yet to be determined.
So you and she have talked about creating something called a Commission on Women and Girls.
Yes.
To help get fair treatment, equal pay, and protect women against mistreatment. This sounds like an idea borrowed from President Obama's White House. Realistically, what would you expect this to do? Or cynics would say, it's just a feel-good thing to appeal to the mood of the moment here.
I don't know what cynics would say, and I don't know that it was borrowed from anywhere, but look, I think the events of the last few weeks have shown us again that we have real issues about full female equality in our society. And for a woman like Professor Ford to come forward with the courage to tell her story and her experience, and to be attacked and then to be sort of belittled and dismissed and ignored, shows me that we still have a long way to go. And for the cynics to say, this is just a feel-good thing to have a commission that will work on rooting out sexual harassment in the workplace, a commission that will work on gender equality in pay and terms and conditions in the workplace, that will help us deal with issues like sexual assault. I think that's something that's quite important. And I think that the fact that she and I are making a commitment to this, we're not just talking about it, we've made a commitment to do this, I think will be very important. And I think it will help us attain the kind of society that we want. As I've tried to illustrate, my wife and I have twins. Those are our two children. They're a boy and a girl. And we've never felt for a moment that our daughter shouldn't have all the same opportunities as our son and not be held back. And I think parents all over Ohio feel that same way, and that's the way our society needs to be.
So how would this work? I mean, would women who have specific issues or instances bring their complaints to this commission? Would the commission conduct a lot of investigating on its own? It seems...
I think it could do both of those things, but I think more to the point, Tom, there are issues where there's specific cabinet departments that focus in a sort of siloed way with those issues. An issue like gender equality spans a lot of things, and to have a commission that would help us figure out which pieces of state government we should bring together to work together on these types of things is important, can work with local government, can work with private employers. One of the things we've said is we're going to have a very strong anti-sexual harassment policy in state government. We're also going to apply it to the businesses that do business with the state. So that'll expand into the private sector as well. So I think there'll be a lot of work for that commission to do. Some of it might be investigative, some of it might be, taking information from people, but a lot of it will be trying to make sure that our state government and our state as a whole lives up to these aspirations and principles that we've had for a long time in this country, but that we could do much more to fulfill.
Okay, maybe in the same subject matter area here, as governor, if there are vacancies on the Ohio State University Board of Trustees, you would appoint them. Do you have any thoughts?
And every other college and university in
Yes,
Ohio.
correct. Yes. What's your opinion about the handling of the whole Urban Meyer situation? I know you didn't hands-on investigate it, but you've certainly read and heard all of the same
So I
reporting.
I didn't hands-on investigate it, and would hate to try to judge those who did, because I don't have the facts in front of me. But I think this is another example of we need to take these issues really seriously. We need to investigate them fully, and proper discipline needs to be meted out to people, no matter how powerful they are. If we're going to set examples here, and one of the things I've said about these issues, sexual harassment, sexual assault, domestic violence, if we're going to change society, it's not just women with the courage to come forward, although that's important, and treating those women with respect and dignity, but it's also men changing the behavior of other men, which is really important if we're going to make real progress on this, and saying to other men, this behavior is unacceptable, I'm not just going to go along or laugh at that.
So you're deeply committed to making improvements here.
We are, both of us are, and I think Ohioans are as well.
You've said that you'd be willing to perhaps use some of the rainy day fund money. Was it $2.67 to $2 2/3 billion?
Yep, keeps going up.
Right,
Yep.
but I think it's near its maximum value.
It
here,
is, yeah.
To help struggling communities who lost a lot of revenue when the state made budget cuts. How would you prioritize, who gets what, and what the order of importance is, and how much of that rainy day fund would you be willing to drain?
Well, so budgeting issues depend on revenues, and you can't easily know exactly what the future will bring, but I'll say this. Number one, we're running big budget surpluses in state government right now. We just banked $670 million in the last fiscal year. Already in the first 3 months of this fiscal year, we're running between $500 million and $1 billion ahead of schedule. So this is a time where we don't need to raise taxes. I've been very clear on that. But what we do need to do is think about what investments we should be making to strengthen our state. And by the way, we're going to have other revenue opportunities coming online. Medical marijuana will finally be implemented under the next governor. It was supposed to be implemented now, but they've missed the deadlines on it, and we'll need to clean that up and move forward. That'll be revenue to the state. We will have sports betting in Ohio. By the way, we already have sports betting in Ohio. We just don't regulate it or get any revenue from it. 40 states within a year will have sports betting. We should have that in Ohio. That'll be more revenue for the state.
Okay. Legislature doesn't seem to be exactly grabbing the brass ring there.
Well, it'll look a lot different once Pennsylvania and West Virginia and Kentucky have sports betting, and
we'll
we
be late to the party
we'll
like casinos,
our
right?
People heading out of state
Right.
and sitting in the parking lots there. Yeah, that's not a long-term strategy for this state. So what investments do we need to make? Those are the things I'm talking about. Early childhood programs are a key investment. I think workforce development is a place we need more investment. Our schools need more investment. And, we should not be piling up surplus. We have a very significant rainy day fund. We shouldn't continue to pile up surpluses at the expense of local governments around the state who are having their funding cut and lacking these investments that are going to strengthen the future of Ohio. So that should be the conversation,
Okay.
and that's what I'm trying to make the conversation in this race.
Did they have a lightning round on Jeopardy?
Not really. They
Okay.
actually, Final Jeopardy is slower than single and double Jeopardy. So.
All right. I'm sure as many people know you are a multiple Jeopardy champion.
Let's make sure we get that into the conversation.
Yes, have to. Obligatory. So here's sort of a lightning round of questions here. Just kind of keep it moving. What qualities that helped you become a Jeopardy champion do you think might be beneficial in running the state of Ohio?
Not much, frankly, but the things I knew on Jeopardy aren't particularly relevant. But poise under pressure and recognizing the the need to compete hard in order to fight for people and win. And in Jeopardy, you're fighting for yourself, but in the governor's office, you're fighting for 11.8 million Ohioans.
What newspapers, magazines, websites do you go to on a fairly regular basis to stay completely informed?
I go to a wide range of, I look at all the Ohio newspapers. I look at it to the extent I can keep up with it. The Economist, Fortune, Forbes, Business Week, which is a legacy from being the consumer chief. I look at American Banker, which makes me a very peculiar individual, I'm sure. And I look at a lot of websites and other things that keep me informed during the day in real time. So, and I talk to a lot of people. I learn a lot from other people as I have conversations, and I've learned a lot from people around Ohio in the course of this campaign, and it will make me a better public official, better office holder, and I think better informed about what people need.
If you are elected, tell me 2 things you would do in your first 60 days in office that you think would have a meaningful impact on the life of many, if not most, Ohioans.
There's a lot of things I want to do, and I'm not really comfortable with boiling it down to just a couple, but I will say one of the big events of the first 60 days will be the governor will present the first budget to the legislature, and it will set priorities, and it will represent commitments, and it will define the debate for the next 6 months over the budget, and set the framework for state government, which I believe will be a somewhat different direction, maybe very different direction from what we've been on. And in terms of implementing some of the things that we can do in the executive branch around protecting people's health care, around making sure the charter schools are held accountable if they're not serving our children, about helping to start to spread out economic opportunity. Those are things that we'll get started on right away because we need to have time for that to work through.
Okay. And the predictable, say something nice about your opponent here in the spirit of bipartisanship. Tell me one thing that Mike DeWine has done that you think is admirable or worthy of applause and recognition.
Well, I'm just coming off this question the other night in the third debate, which
I knew
is
that.
I think he's a good family man, as I am, so I respect that about him. I think he gets a lot of support and sustenance from his wife and his children, and I do as well, and I think we're similar in that respect.
All right. Do you expect President Obama will be back to make any appearances on your behalf?
I don't know, but I hope so. He was here in Cleveland just a few weeks ago. That was his first swing around the country since he left the presidency, and I was honored to have him here, and I think he fired up a lot of voters.
All right. Richard Cordray, thanks for spending so much time. I think we're talked out here, so very grateful for you coming by.
Okay.
All right, we are out of time, and again, we are grateful for Mr. Cordray's visit, filling in some of the blanks for undecided voters. Now, we've already interviewed Republican Mike DeWine. That is posted at both WKYC.com and the University of Akron YouTube, Facebook sites. We will wrap up our interviews a week from Friday, on October 19th at 10:30, with Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown. Remember, polls don't make the decisions. Your going to the polls does. Thanks for watching.